The measure passes. Colleagues, we're going to go back to file item 50, AB 1235. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1235 by Assemblymember Gibson, enacting Medi-Cal.
Mr. Gibson, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to present AB 1235, which seeks to improve quality of life and save the state in long-term care costs by increasing the home upkeep allowance to fully cover the cost of nursing facilities and residential homes. Across the state of California, there are many residents who are eligible to leave nursing facilities but are forced to stay indefinitely because they have nowhere to go. Currently, California provides a home upkeep allowance for maintaining the home while the individuals are in the facility to support their transition and also the quality of life. However, this allowance is only $209 a month, which is insufficient to maintain a home in California. A report commissioned by the California Health and Human Service agencies recommend an increase in the allowance as a way to decrease the long-term costs that's caused by this. Because each person who transitioned back into their home is one less person that the state has to pay for because of the high cost of staying in a nursing home. By increasing the allowance, no one will be provided, by increasing the allowance, not only will we provide people to improve the quality of life and allow them the joy of staying in their own home, we would certainly ask that my colleagues support an aye vote.
Ms. Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Chair of Aging and Long-Term Care, I want to underscore the importance of this bill. It's very valuable for us to have a safe place to return once a person has been referred to a nursing home. They need their independence. We need to do what we can for our seniors. This is an excellent bill. And don't forget, 1,000 people a day are turning 65, and the silver tsunami is on its way.
Seeing and hearing no further discussion, Mr. Gibson, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleague for her comments. This bill received bipartisan support in both the Assembly Health and Appropriation Committee. Again, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 70, no 0. The measure passes. Colleagues, file item 52 we'd already dispensed with. Now going to file item 56, AB 1266. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1266 by Assemblymember Gonzalez, enacting to electrical and gas corporations.
Assemblymember Gonzalez, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 1266 is an effort to increase transparency and accountability when public utilities charge ratepayers for multi-million-dollar bonuses for their executives, despite having major safety violations in the preceding months and years. Currently, executive compensations are incorporated into a general rate case. In 2013, Edison was found negligent by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for mismanagement of songs, causing it to be decommissioned. This cost ratepayers in my district and yours $3.4 billion. Still, the Edison chairman took $9.9 million in bonuses above his salary. In 2014, according to the compensation information with the CPUC, the chairman took more than $12 million in excess compensation, and the president of Edison and all the vice presidents took a combined total of nearly $55 million in excess compensation. Ratepayers should not be on the hook for excessive executive compensation, especially when a federal or state safety violation has occurred. This will bring light to these activities. This bill will ensure that following a safety violation that costs ratepayers more than $5 million, and prior to seeking excess compensation, a public utility would be required to file a Tier 3 advice letter, and the CPUC would have to hold a public hearing on the excess compensation request. The CPUC would then determine if ratepayers should shoulder the costs of excess compensation or if it should be the responsibility of the shareholders. Our constituents, the ratepayers, deserve this protection. Members, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Gonzalez, what's your pleasure?
Keep it open, please.
All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Gonzalez, what is your pleasure?
Keep it open, please.
All members vote who desire to vote. Move the call. Mr. Jones moves the call. Okay. It's been moved. File item 57 we've dispensed with. File item 58, pass or retain. File item 59 we've dispensed with. Let's go to file item 60, AB 170. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 170 by Assemblymember Gatto, an act relating to newborn screening.
Mr. Gatto, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If your child is born in California, your child's blood samples are stored by the state and sold to researchers to be used in medical research. AB 170 seeks to inform parents of their rights underneath this state program. Newborn screening is one of the great public health success stories in this country, but what happens after the samples, after the screening process is completed, raises serious and troubling questions of consent and privacy. In the case of California and a handful of other states, these samples are stored indefinitely in state repositories and then sold to researchers for a fee. Most parents are poorly informed, if at all, about the storage and medical research conducted on these samples. Under current law, parents have the right to opt out of having their child's samples stored forever and used in research, but this information is buried on the second to last page of a 14-page pamphlet that is given to parents at a very emotional time. It's hard to exercise a right that you don't know you have about a program that you don't know exists. So it's imperative for both the health of this program and for California's continued trust in their government that parents are fully informed of the biobank program and the intended future use of their child's DNA. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Bonta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 170. I want to thank my colleague from Glendale for working so closely with stakeholders and the Assembly Health Committee to address concerns. Thanks to the author, this is a bill that ensures that parents are fully informed of their rights regarding the newborn genetic disease screening program and simultaneously maintains the scientific integrity of the program. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Dubovne, you're recognized.
I also rise in support of my colleague from Glendale in AB 170. Ultimately, this bill is about giving parents the ability to decide their child's blood sample is stored by the state. Although newborn screening has led to tremendous improvements in public health, most parents are not properly informed about what's happening to their child's DNA. Without impacting the valuable public health impacts of screening, This bill will help remedy this lack of information. I applaud the author for working with all the stakeholders bringing this bill forward, as it strikes a balance between the concerns of the medical industry and privacy groups. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Assemblymember Calderon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 170. Parents should be fully informed that their child's newborn dried blood samples are being stored by the state and then sold to researchers. Further, parents should have the option to opt out of this storage and eventual research program should they desire. This bill, at its core, is about protecting the genetic privacy of children born in this state and informing their parents about the medical research being conducted from these blood samples. AB 170 informs and protects the rights of parents in California, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Ms. Baker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I thank our colleague from Glendale for efforts to improve this bill. I still rise in opposition, and I explain why. Because the notice that we are providing, which is absolutely notice that parents should get, is at the wrong time. It will be too easy for that information to be garbled in with so many other disclosures that parents are getting, that they will make a decision that will prevent them from actually allowing the newborn screening to go forward. The time to provide the opt-out, this information that the gentleman from Glendale would like parents to have, is after a separate time, after the child's been born, all during the first several years of birth when you're going to the pediatrician and having multiple well baby visits. But having the disclosure required here at this time places too great a risk for the newborn screening decision not to be made by the parent, and for that information, as the gentleman from Glendale mentions, being confused, and we can't risk having newborn screening not conducted by these parents. So this could be something I would be able to support if the disclosure is at a different time, separate from the birth of the child, which has already been identified as emotional time, but too many mistakes can be made, and that has an impact on whether or not newborn screening is conducted. So I rise in opposition.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Gatto, you may close.
Well, thank you. I thank all my colleagues who spoke on this bill, and I thank the gentlelady from the East Bay for her passion on this bill. However, I do feel like the ball has moved and the goalposts have moved a little bit with this bill. We're happy to continue to working with everybody to address their concerns, including the member from the East Bay. But I'm not aware of any way for the state to do this without incurring great cost other than as the bill is drafted. I think it's a good bill. It represents compromise, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
This time the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 8. The measure passes. File item 61, AB 271. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 271 by Assemblymember Obernolte and others, and act relating to child care.
Assemblymember Obernolte, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 271 would allow child care agencies that contract with the Department of Education to store the required records electronically instead of on paper. I was astonished to learn that these agencies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in warehousing this information. Members, this is money that I would rather we allow them to spend on caring for our children rather than on warehousing paper. This bill received unanimous bipartisan support in committee, and there was no opposition. I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Cork, you're recognized.
In looking at your bill, Mr. Obernolte, I know you're trying to do the right thing, but why store the data? You're storing all sorts of records. Why not use a more modern system?
Without objection, Mr. Obernolte can choose to answer that now or in your close.
I'll take a point of personal privilege. Mason's rules of legislative procedure dictate we should address each other by our point of origin and not by our proper names. If you would please instruct the gentleman.
Point well
yes,
taken.
The member from Big Bear.
Okay, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reading through the bill and the analysis, and I read that it says operating or providing app providers to maintain records electronically. So in preparation for this bill, I looked up some electronic apps, and I came across one by Farsight Studios. and it's called Pinball Arcade. And there's a free electronic app, Pinball Arcade, and a not free one you have to pay for, Pinball Arcade. And I was wondering if the author could describe to the floor, since he's talking about electronic apps, and I'm trying to stay on point here, Mr. Speaker, because I see you getting a little agitated up there. And I certainly wouldn't want to delay the work of the floor today. If the author, a question of the author, please, Mr. Speaker.
That's what I was going to ask you to ask without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Obernolte from Big Bear.
Again, I ask colleagues to address colleagues from their place of origin, but thank you.
Origin. Were you born in Big Bear? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not my
place of representation.
That's not my question. Sorry. To the author from Big Bear, what is the difference between the free app and the pay app?
Mr. Obernolte, again, you may choose to answer that now or in your close.
Well, it's such a serious question, I feel like I should answer in the same degree of seriousness. Mr. Speaker, the people of California should know that this legislature would never play games with their hard-earned tax dollars, and I ask that you help me to send them that message by voting aye on AB 271.
Mr. Jones.
On my own time, being properly admonished from my colleague in Big Bear, I ask for an aye vote.
And with that, seeing and hearing no further debate, Mr. Obernolte, you may close.
I respectfully request your aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 68, no 0. The measure passes. Going now to file item 62, AB 276. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 276 by the Committee on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials, enacting into hazardous materials.
This item will be presented by Mr. Alejo. Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 276 by the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee will grant new authority to the Department of Toxic Substances Control and matches existing authority to the U.S. EPA authority they already have to request financial information from parties potentially responsible for toxic waste cleanup. Under the existing state law, DTSC can ask for information related to hazardous materials and waste, but it cannot request information about a party's finances, which could demonstrate the party's ability to pay cleanup costs. Having the authority to ask for financial information will allow DTSC to identify those parties who could genuinely lack the ability to pay for cleanup and obviate the need for DTSC to first sue to obtain financial information. Aligning state law with federal law will help expedite the cost recovery process and save the state costs otherwise being expended on unnecessary litigation. AB 276 has no opposition. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 68, no 0. The measure passes. File item 63, AB 348. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 348 by Assemblymember Brown and others, enacting into healthcare facilities.
Assemblymember Brown, you may open.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. AB 348 has passed unanimously in each committee thus far, and thus far there's been no opposition. Industry advocates support it, and it's about nursing facilities. Despite the dedication of most nursing facilities, neglect, mistreatment, and abuse are unfortunately a reality for far too many nursing home residents. AB 348 establishes a 45-day time frame, along with a 30-day extension, if necessary, for the Department of Public Health to complete investigations of nursing home complaints beginning 2018. Members, this standard is currently in effect in general acute hospitals. It was an internal policy at licensing and certification until 2007. On purely moral grounds, how can we leave indefensible elders any more vulnerable than we do indefensible children? I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will tally the votes. And the clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 73, no 0. The measure passes. File item 64, AB 496, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 496 by Assemblymember Rendon, enacting to people nutrition.
Mr. Rendon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Water is a basic human right, yet over 25% of schools in California do not provide free, fresh drinking water to students, despite the fact that federal laws require that they do so. Limited funding and a growing list of needs to repair crumbling school facilities causes clean drinking water to fall to the wayside. School districts may be unaware of various state and federal funding streams available to them, including Proposition 1. AB 496 creates a one-stop shop for school districts to find information and funding for water quality and facility improvements. This bill is critical to ensuring the health and safety of all children in public schools and curbing the rise of diabetes and obesity. I urge your aye vote for AB 496.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 71, no 0. The measure passes. File item 65, AB 806. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 806 by Assemblymember Dodd and others, enacting to redevelopment.
Assemblymember Dodd, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 806 addresses several issues that have been identified in needing cleanup in the redevelopment dissolution statute. Each year since the dissolution of local redevelopment agencies, the legislature identifies relatively minor issues that require some adjustments in the dissolution statute. AB 806 makes minor modifications in the law. This is a good bill. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, no 0. The measure passes. Moving now to file item 66, AB 1140. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1140 by Assemblymember Bonta, enacting to the California Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board, making appropriation therefore.
Assemblymember Bonta, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The California Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board administers the California Victim Compensation Program to compensate victims of specific types of crimes through the Restitution Fund. The program framework was developed decades ago without a significant revamp since then. To address some of the outdated restrictions and the need to modernize the program, the board conducted a statute modernization project, bringing together various stakeholders to make recommendations on updating the program to better serve victims. AB 1140 would implement many of the recommendations made by the California Victim Compensation Program's statute modernization project to modernize the existing statutes. For example, the bill would update various laws barring victims of domestic violence from fully participating in the program and would include online harassment as a compensable crime. This is a practical bill brought forward by the group that administers the program as well as victim advocate groups. I believe they've been able to strike a successful and balanced set of principles to modernize the program that will more fairly care for victimized children and adults in California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Lackey, you're recognized.
Yes, Chair and members, I would encourage an aye vote here, but I would also like to encourage my colleague from Oakland to make sure that none of the probationers or parolees receive any money until they pay everything they owe to all victims and victim funds. Thank you.
And hearing no further debate, Mr. Bonta, you may close.
I want to thank my colleague for raising that issue. It's on our radar. We're working on it. We think it's sensible in principle, but we know that there are some challenges with respect to application. So we're going to continue to work with the stakeholders going forward to see if we can address that concern. Thank you for raising it. Members, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 70, no 0. The measure passes. File item 67, we will pass and retain. File item 68, AB 33. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 33 by Assemblymember Quirk, enacting the greenhouse gases.
Mr. Quirk, you may proceed.
As we're hearing the previous bill talking about a goal of 50% renewables, it was brought up that if we do things in exactly the way we've done them up till now, that the ISO has found that we have difficulty using all of that energy because we are in excess at certain times of day. There are, however, other approaches which we haven't tried. For example, sharing renewables on a regional basis so that we would use Wyoming wind, which is very complementary to us, that we'd use New Mexico and Arizona solar, which then could meet our morning peak. The regional sharing is one way it could be done. I have asked the ISO, and they have agreed to do simulations to see how much just this sort of approach would help. There are many other approaches which are covered in this bill, and in particular, things like retrofitting our natural gas plants and allowing for them to be more flexible so that they could accommodate changes in renewables more easily. There are many possibilities here, and the point here is to look at what is the cheapest, best way that allows us to use the most energy at the least cost. I've talked with the chair of the Utilities and Commerce Committee. We've agreed to have a hearing on this to look at the various questions so that the members can ask and take a look at the various alternatives. It's for this reason that I have support both from environmental organizations and from the California Manufacturing and Technology Association. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Chavez, you're recognized.
Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this, and I'd like to compliment the maker of the bill, the Assembly member from Hayward. This is a critical issue in the state of California. Members, as we look across the state, you know, there's a lot of discussion on water, but clearly energy is something that we need to get in front of. As I've said many times publicly, I actually believe that we have a serious issue with climate change, and we need to look at how we provide energy and resources. There's breaking technology every day and how to develop energy, also retention of energy, and also the transmission of energy. This sort of thoughtful approach by the member from Hayward is critically needed. Probably one of the most important bills we'll be doing here this year. I would strongly recommend an aye vote on this.
Mr. Valley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also would like to stand in support of this bill. This is exactly what we should be doing for the Renewable Portfolio Standard. We should be looking at the western United States and being able to bring that energy in at times when we don't have it. Transmission is another huge way we can reduce the carbon footprint if we just build transmission without having to build new plants in solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, all those things. This is the right approach. This is the way we should be headed. I commend the author and gladly support this bill.
Mr. Perea, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't let all the Republicans have all the fun here. I, too, rise in strong support of this measure, and I want to thank the author for his approach. It's been said here before, but it's a very thoughtful approach at how we try to meet the targets that this legislature may or may not set by the end of the year. I think not only setting the target is important, but how we get there is even more important. And I think this bill allows us to look at diversified approaches. One that I would like to highlight that was already mentioned by the author, and that is this idea of taking a regional approach at how we deal with energy. I think that it's a great idea, one worth exploring, and I understand that there are a lot of folks that are looking at this issue, but it's one of many that I think can help this legislature meet the goals, the ambitious goals that are set forth by this body, and will allow us to deliver energy, clean energy, in an affordable way, because I think in the end we're all concerned about our ratepayers, and we all want to make sure that while we set these ambitious goals, we do them in a way that doesn't adversely impact bills for the ratepayers and our constituents that we represent. So kudos to the author. Congratulations on a great bill, and I look forward to casting an aye vote. Thank you.